Hello and welcome to the show. I am so excited to share this interview with you because it is with somebody who I have so much love for, and she inspires me so much to be the best human I can be, and I know her story will inspire you as well. So this week's guest is Joaly Trinidad. She is the co-founder of Iboga Retreat Center and education platform Root and Wisdom, and the nonprofit Sacred Roots Foundation. Actually, in the next 2 weeks here, I will be posting the interview with her co-founder and husband, Troy Valencia. So Jo is one of those people that's very multifaceted. Some of the many things which she talks about is she has her master's in counseling, she's a kambo provider, a sound and energy worker, yoga teacher, breathwork guide, the list goes on. But really, what we get into is her experience of becoming a space holder and being a space holder for Iboga, which includes being of service as well as being initiated into the Bwiti. Some highlights from this episode: how building a relationship with Blue Lotus guided her to some of the first tools of balancing her own field and the energetic field of others, what Iboga is, its indigenous roots, and how Joaly found herself on the path of service of this plant after following her now husband to Costa Rica. We touch on her Taino roots, which is the historic indigenous peoples of the Caribbean, and how the spirit of her great-grandfather, a Taino man who practiced hands-on healing rooted in this culture, guided her to one of her first psychedelic plant medicine experiences with psilocybin. And then we also touch on Jo's experience of traveling all the way to Africa while 5 months pregnant to be initiated into the Bwiti, who are the indigenous keepers of Iboga. Jo just lives with such integrity and presence and poise that is so inspiring. She is just such a beautiful person inside and out, and I am so grateful to have her in my life. And I will wrap up my little love fest over here and let you get into the episode. If you would like to connect with Jo, whether that's to follow her journey or work with her, which from personal experience, I highly recommend, you can find all of her information in the show notes. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling, where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. All right, Miss Jo, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I I feel a loss of words introducing you because you are just such a goddess to me. And so I want to give you the floor to introduce yourself. And then afterwards, I'd love to just share a little bit of my first couple of experiences with you to sort of paint the picture to the listener of this relationship we have here, as well as actually this came in one time when I was interviewing somebody's, what do you stand for? So yeah, sharing who you are and what you stand for here.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be a guest on your podcast. Well, a little bit about me. I feel that I am an eternal student of spiritual traditions and life in general, and go into my background and then discuss a little bit more about what I stand for, because I believe that I am fortunate enough to have both coincide. I have a master's in counseling. I am currently walking this life in service of Iboga and its origins through holding space and ceremonies at Root and Wisdom, a retreat center school platform that my husband, Troy Valencia, and I co-founded. It is heavily centered around reciprocity, which is something that we are very, very passionate about. And we're able to do this through our nonprofit, which is a 501(c)(3) called Sacred Roots Foundation. I am also a kambo provider, a biofield tuning practitioner, a breathwork guide, a yoga instructor, and a sound energy worker. Within my path, it's been very, very important to really create the space within myself for listening and to learn how to use spiritual tools and nature to be able to transmute very difficult experiences and turn them into gifts, into light, into beauty, into magic.
It's beautiful, very well articulated. It's funny because I was trying to figure out because when I met you, I was like, I definitely want her on the podcast. And I was trying to figure out the direction to go. And at one point, I was thinking of the whisper because at one point I recorded a podcast on the whispers of perfectionism, talking about how I like had to work to let go of perfectionism to move forward in life. But then when we did our breath work together, and I mean, other than our initial call to talk about Iboga, that was the first time I got to put a face to the voice. And I loved that when at the end of our breathwork session, you said to us, "You are perfect." And you said, "I know that people don't often say that, but you are perfect." And we said, "You're perfect too." And you go, "I know." And and I was like, wow, I've never had that sort of interaction with somebody before of just the comments. I don't know if I want to call it a compliment because it's a statement of the true nature, which is we are perfect. And then you felt so embodied and didn't feel any discomfort in being told you are perfect. And I loved that. And then when I met you, what really stood out to me as well is just seeing the culmination of all the inner work that you've done and seeing it play out and how you behave. And you're very still and you didn't fidget much. You didn't look around the room much. You were so present and so still within yourself. And I just knew, okay, whatever we're about to do, because with Iboga, I was, scared shitless. I was like, whatever we're about to do, I trust it because if this is a product, if this stillness is a product, I'm in. I'm in because yeah, I can see it. And so with all of that, obviously you have put a lot of work and time and energy and love into cultivating the Joe you are now. I would love to talk a bit about who you were as a child and also just how you walked into your awakening and where did you begin? Because you have so many trainings under your belt here.
Mm. Thank you so much for reflecting that back to me. I I think it's one of the favorite things about myself. There's something that happens now when I receive a compliment that I get very childlike. I was walking today and someone told me I was beautiful, and I did the funniest thing with my hands. I said, "Thank you," and kind of just
Like a fairy.
and I was like, "Where'd that come from?" I'm going with it, but thank you for reflecting that back to me because it did take work. It's not something that has been natural for me. I used to get really uncomfortable receiving a compliment or being seen. So thank you so much for reflecting that. Yeah, a bit about how I was as a kid. I was very curious and very much in this magical playland. I just really gravitated towards nature, was consistently picking flowers for my mom, and really just felt the magic of the world and earth and following butterflies and seeing where they lead me. sometimes capturing them and not realizing that they wouldn't be able to survive in my little Beauty and the Beast backpack. So, learning that lesson. But yeah, I really had a beautiful childhood in that I was able to entertain my imagination and to be in magic, which I read somewhere once that magic is the ability to recognize the divine in all things. So I'm really grateful that I was able to have that since a kid.
I remember when we were, you told me once about the story of yourself as a kid. I don't remember all the details, but how you were hiding in a cabinet and for hours your mom couldn't find you. When she did find you, you were so, oh, hi, like just very casual. While she was with it, then I was like, I totally see that.
Right after she had a whole complete meltdown and had the movie scene of the curtains in the window blowing out, her thinking that I jumped out or something happening. Well, just to and to add a little bit of context to that, I was very in touch with magic and at the same time was very, very sensitive to my surroundings. So I did gravitate more towards nature for that reason because being around people, I just felt so much and never understood why. I did see visions or hear things and could not make sense of what was happening until later on in my life.
Did you have to turn it off when you got older, like in your teens and 20s?
Well, living in New York, I begged for it to turn off. I begged. And it did. It did at some point. And then I missed it and I wished it back. And what I learned was that if I learned my center and if I learned how to be able to access my own energetic signature, that I can find myself amidst all the noise and then be able to use it as a gift and to be use it for service. And there was a time where I was very suspicious about my ability to be able to do that because I felt that it also boosted my ego to be able to know what people were feeling and sense what was living in their body. And I had to really reel myself in and ground myself in knowing that whatever gifts I was given in this incarnation, that I would use it for the service of the betterment of other people. But that was a practice.
What were some of your tools that helped you access your center?
Yeah, beautiful question. I love this question because I believe that it's one of my life's work and being able to just explore the tools that are available that help us access our innate wisdom and gifts. And sound was a big one because if I was able to tune into my own frequency, then I can learn how to discern and bring myself back to my own. So using sound bowls, using tuning forks. Uh, During COVID was a time where I was extremely sensitive to what people were feeling. So much so that my body just felt really heavy and someone would pass by and I would get all this sort of information in my body and not be able to dispel it afterwards. I would just hold on to it and then have messed up dreams, specific dreams about other people's lives and what was going on in their world and realm. And I was actually working with Blue Lotus at the time. And meditating with Blue Lotus one day, it stopped me in my tracks. I was listening to the wisdom of this plant, and it just told me, go look into sound healing instruments. So I was like, oh, strange. I was meditating, but okay, I'm gonna listen. And there was this voice that said, look for it, and I will tell you when you see it, you're going to know. So I was looking sound healing instruments, sound healing tools, and I stumbled upon tuning forks, and it was like, boom, that's it. That. You get tuning forks, and I had never seen tuning forks ever. So besides in the doctor's office. So I was like, okay, strange apparatus. I thought it was going to go towards a different route, but I got it. And then I started working with tuning forks, and all this information started to be downloaded within my system about how to almost almost like putting a needle on a record, being able to listen when I stroke a tuning fork in a particular spot in someone's field, what was going on, at what age. I would receive visions about what happened and hear voices or connect to their own guides and receive all this type of information, and also learn how to bring any lost biophotons that had been trapped in their field due to difficult experiences that were not integrated into their system, and use a tuning fork to bring it back so that they could find coherence within their field. And then I learned that I can do that for myself after sessions, finding ways to bring myself back to my own coherence.
Oh, that's really cool. It sounds like it was like I'm torn between radio or like phone. It was like a way of you to listen and access, but also to fine tune for them. Like it was a tool as well as a like a telephone in a way to the other side. And is this the Joe special, or is this something that you also you picked and chose things from other tuning fork I don't know, informational trainings or whatever, or is this was this just you playing and finding your way through it?
Thankfully, I played first. So I played first, and I just allowed myself to explore what the tuning forks could do for me and for others. And then I stumbled upon Aileen McCusick, who has pioneered this whole biofield tuning technique. And when I started reading her books, I realized that a lot of the things that I was doing were spot on with what she had found, was living in the field with different zones of where certain things tend to live. And I'm grateful that I was able to explore it for myself as opposed to just taking someone else's word for it, and that I was able to access that wisdom because it empowered me so much so as a practitioner. However, Aileen McCusick's work is fantastic, is super incredible. But yeah, I'm grateful I was able to play.
Yeah. It makes me kind of think of The Enemy of Clarity, how there were times when I was trying out new things and I was like, well, I figured it out. So I don't need trainings. I don't need anyone else's work to look. If anything, that'll muddle but it kept me so blocked and so small. So that's beautiful that you were playing on both sides of it. And again, uh, I wonder if that was your intention of this is I'm here for the highest good. You know, I'm not doing this so I can show people how special and important I am.
Absolutely.
You are obviously no longer in New York, and I would love for you to kind of share with us the trajectory of how and why you left New York. What did you get up to right after? Yeah, and how did you find Iboga? Of course, we gotta let Iboga enter the conversation here.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by sharing a little bit about what Iboga is. Iboga is it's a root bark, and it's a sacrament, a plant medicine that is used primarily in Gabon in Central Africa. It was found by the Babongo people and the Bwiti, which is the spiritual tradition that centers their spiritual practices around this beautiful, beautiful medicine. They have used Iboga and have been able to find the spiritual gifts of Iboga for a means of communication with ancestors, with the spiritual, um, with the other higher realms, and to use it to resolve internal conflict and to also help others heal. They call themselves those who are holding the medicine as shamans. They call themselves Ganga, which is a healer or a seer. So they're able to see other people's fields and see what is causing them suffering. So I remember specifically being in New York. I was a guidance counselor at the time and learning a lot more about my roots, about just different family members who were touch healers and seers themselves, and getting very curious about the Taino side. Tainos are the indigenous people of Dominican Republic. My sister inspired me to start researching more about what it means to be Taino and what sort of spiritual traditions were in place before colonialization. And I remember being curious about the African side, the African spirituality, because it's not like this is something that was very spoken of. There was still a lot of fear, and still is a lot of fear in Dominican Republic and in my family when it comes to talking about these sort of healing traditions and using herbalism. Anything that sounds too witchy can invoke this sense of fear because of the level of persecution that was present for anyone that was doing these sort of practices. So much so that in Dominican Republic, there's something called the 21 divisions, which is Taino spirituality, African spirituality, and it's placed under the guise of Catholicism. So they were able to find a way or loophole to practice these things and to name different beings that they revered under Catholic beings. So yeah, I had this sort of curiosity of what that looked like, and also felt this calling to go to a retreat and to work with plant medicine. I started to learn more about plant medicine and became curious about it, and just also felt the tense energy in New York and wanted to be in nature. So I remember having a conversation with my best friend where she asked me, what does that look like? What would your ideal scenario be? And I spoke about, well, I don't have the money or the financial means currently to be able to afford getting myself to a plant medicine retreat. So it would need to be gifted. I want it to be in nature. I want it to this, just specifically naming these things. And then I end up meeting Troy, who's now my husband, and he had already found his path and had his spiritual awakening with ayahuasca and had found Iboga and was committed to moving to Costa Rica to be in service of Iboga. So he invited me along on his journey. And without any hesitance, I was like, fuck yeah. Um, it was everything that I was envisioning of how I wanted to be introduced to this plant medicine space. And yeah, it's taken me on this beautiful, beautiful journey where I've been able to now hold space.
It's I'm thinking two things. One, that's one hell of a gift. You asked for the gift of a retreat and instead you got a husband and a life in Costa Rica and a beautiful career. I don't know, is would you call would you call it a career?
I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit. But then the other thing I wanted to say, it's so funny because I'll make little mental notes like, oh, ask her about Blue Lotus. And then 10 seconds later, you start mentioning Blue Lotus. And then when you mentioned the Taino, I was like, I'm curious if it was something that was hidden and full of fear and almost shame in her family. And then you mentioned that. So yeah, you're listening. Um, Pausing, actually, going back to the Taino, because I've actually been doing some research on them ever since we started talking about it. Are there certain ancestors who you feel like you would like to mention while touching on this history that your lineage has of hand healers? And have you connected with any of these ancestors as you've stepped into your role within this world?
Thank you for that question because it was actually a very, very big part of how I got into my curiosity about plant medicine during that COVID time of just chaos and madness and attunement and sensitivity and beauty and self-reflection as well. I started meditating and getting glimpses of my great-grandfather. That's one of the ancestors that was a touch healer. And he did this practice called santiguar, which is basically using herbs and placing them on the spot where people had physical ailments, and then using the power of the cross, just putting the cross or the directions on top of the herbs, using his hands over and over and praying on that ailment and just healing people on the spot. So he would have people line up in the colmado or the deli that they owned in my family. And if he would get sick and go to the hospital, he would make sure he just took the time to recuperate and then start walking around and helping others get better as well. So just to paint the picture of what a beautiful, beautiful man he was. And I started to have him show up in my meditations and my visions, and he started to communicate with me. I would wander off and I would find a mushroom and a feather next to one another. And it would be a white mushroom, white feather, or a yellow mushroom, yellow feather. So the mushroom had the same color of the feather. And I just knew whenever I would wander off into different spaces and find that that it was his way of communicating with me and telling me to explore mushrooms. So it did start off for me with a mushroom journey where I learned so much about myself, and I am very grateful to my great-grandfather. Papa Carmelo is what they called him, for initiating me into this path in a way.
Ah, thank you, Papa Carmelo. Mm.
Mhm.
So mushrooms, well, mushrooms slash Blue Lotus were kind of the first plant medicines you really consciously started working with.
Yes, absolutely. Those two were the first.
And then when you arrived in Costa Rica, I mean, were you just kind of thrown right into it? Did you did you start as a volunteer? How did your role sort of come into fruition?
Yeah, it was interesting. I just sat with the medicine and it wasn't peaches and rainbow. I will say it was very, very difficult. My journeys were very, very tough for me, especially because I was at a place where I thought I had done the work. And I really found the truth of what I was harboring inside and how much things I was holding on to and harboring. And yeah, it was really beautiful because I was able to sit and learn how the medicine worked. And I was basically thrown into it afterwards. Just 2 weeks or so, I began holding space. So I initially came as a volunteer, but quickly became working, quickly started working as a facilitator at the retreat.
What was that like? Was it, I just, I mean, for myself at least, I imagine myself being thrown into it. I imagine I'd be like, huh, oh boy. And then maybe when ceremony actually begins and it's time, it's all Stephanie and all thought just goes out the window. And something actually that I think about, because I remember in ceremony when you came to help me with my psycho spiritual aspect of it, you knew exactly what to say. And I remember thinking like, damn, she's good. And then the next day, and I'm sure, you've had years of working with this now, but then I remember the next day it was either you or Troy, you were saying, that was all you guys. And I was thinking, no, you guys were there too. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have gone to the places. And then one of you said, well, that was Iboga. Like we that was Iboga working through us. So yeah, would you mind touching on just the development of being a space holder, a facilitator, and what that experience is like?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved it. I don't think that there was any doubt in my mind about doing it. I felt that I had been prepared for doing exactly that, to hold space and to be able to do so ceremonially with this sacrament and in nature. I absolutely loved every second of it. And I think a big, big part, it is all of it. It is the person. It is this spiritual tool or spiritual technology, as Troy, my husband, likes to call it. And it is part of learning to allow ourselves to be a hollow bone or hollow vessel, to allow this information to come through, to be able to support people and meet them where they are at without having a specific agenda of where we think that they need to be. So it was a combination of all of it and my background in counseling and being able to get my training in yoga. It allowed me to be an active listener and to learn more about how certain things manifest themselves in the body. So find a way to also guide people somatically through their experience. So I didn't feel a hesitance about it. It's almost like it just naturally flowed and it was everything that I had been prepared for.
Right. That does make sense. It does, especially considering the counseling background. Yeah. Oh, I had so much fun with our little journey. I don't, do you remember Momo? Yeah.
Absolutely. We had a blast.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things about doing this work. I'll just explain a little bit. So when people take Iboga, they put an eye mask on. Usually the ceremony starts around 9 p.m. and lasts until 6 a.m. And at times it can go into the next day, which is a day of insights, of still receiving information and wisdom from the medicine, but it's also the medicine is you. The medicine is amplifying what's inside of you. So in this space, when people are laying down with the eye mask, either Troy or myself will come and guide people through what we call a psycho-spiritual journey. And it's an opportunity to go in and to help people more or less learn how to navigate that spiritual realm. So there's different things that can come up, such as a gate or portal or a cave. And we sort of just encourage people to go into it because sometimes people don't know. I like to think of it as a video game. It's almost like Legend of Zelda. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but sometimes you'll see a character there and a little gnome or something, and you can go up to that character and ask questions. And I've had journeys where people will have full on conversations that are deep, deep, deep with a tree. And yeah, and one of the ways in which, unfortunately, we've seen it be used is just heavily focused on trauma and inner child work. And we found that that's just such a limited way of being able to use Iboga. So when you mentioned Momo, it was a character that came up. I don't know if you'd like to share a little bit more about your journey, because I think that would be really awesome for people to hear. But there's play in it. You can play. You can explore different things and just create a different perspective of the way that you experience the things that happen to you and be able to reframe it into light.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like there were so many moments of it was almost like I don't know if it was Iboga or my mind, but they saw me in moments because the culmination of Momo coming through was seeing something that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Um and I've come to learn that what I believe or don't believe, it doesn't matter. What matters is how is manifesting in my body. And so it was a really hard realization. I'm like crying and then I had this ball of yarn just like kind of explode on my insides. And you're like, okay, well, the cool thing about, yarn that gets everywhere is usually there's a source. So we found the source in my body and we pulled the string out. And I was thinking, I don't know what to do with it. Before I even said it, you go, so here's a few things you can do with the string. You can just let it go into the ether, or you can open up your heart and let your heart transmute it. So I decided to pull the string from my insides and let it be transmuted around my heart. And that's where I saw Momo. So if no one's familiar, it's from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It was like hanging around my heart. And I was like, oh, Momo's here. Okay, let's ask Momo if he can help. And I'm like, okay, okay. And then Momo starts running around the room, just picking up random strings and putting them in my heart. And I'm like, and I tell you, you go, oh, that's so Momo. And we're like, Momo, stay focused here. And then next thing I know, I'm giggling and the tears are processed. The hard part is really over. And then I'm back to giggles and into my usual silly self. And it just felt like it just oscillated so fluidly between that. Just, oh my God, I can't believe this. Oh, good tears and misery. And then, like, oh, that was a silly little flower over there. It was, I loved it. I really enjoyed, I felt so at home within Iboga for that reason.
That's beautiful. And I will mention there's a very special quality about Iboga that a lot of people have mentioned is that they could be going through something very, very difficult as you shared in their journey. And then all of a sudden it'll go into cartoon breaks where people will start to see certain cartoon characters such as Momo, such as just different very, very random cartoons showing a little skit of sorts. And sometimes it's related to the experience, but sometimes it's just, hey, you've been doing a lot. Let's take it to commercial breaks.
Yes. I love that. Oh, well, the last thing I'd like to get into is you recently went to Africa and or not led, but I mean, I saw that like there was because I was looking at your Instagram and I saw that you had advertised for it and it was you and other women, right? You all went to Africa or was it just you?
No, that's a different. I'll be doing a
Oh.
women's, so that's a separate thing.
Oh,
I
okay. So this was just you.
This was just me going to Africa to experience initiation. Yeah, so very, very interesting. When I first sat with Iboga during my second ceremony, I had this vision of me going to Africa and getting initiated. And I was doing so with this golden orb in my belly. And I was holding on to this golden orb. And I received information from this vision that the first time that I would be journeying to Africa would be with my child. So that I was going to be pregnant and getting initiated. And in the beginning of this year, I started to plan for this journey to go to Africa. So there was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm going to Africa this year. What else does that mean? Because I remember quite vividly that I was going to be doing so with child. And my aunt, this is another aunt, my tia Argentina, she is a powerful, powerful seer. And she called me and she said, hey, you're having a baby in December. And I was like, I laughed and I said, maybe next December or some other time. And she said, yeah, maybe. Okay, have a nice day. And then she just hung up. And I haven't heard from her since. It was so, so funny because, yeah, I found out in April that I was pregnant and it just so aligned that I would be going to Africa and getting initiated while I was 5 months pregnant. And if I didn't have the trust that I do in both Iboga and spirit, this would have been something that would have freaked me out and deterred me from doing the whole thing. But I trusted myself, I trusted spirit, and I just went for it. And it was so powerful, so, so beautiful. I learned so much. The people there are incredible. They are devoted, devoted, devoted. And you can see this devotion through their level of strength. They will spend all day skinning chickens, fish, cooking, washing multiple dishes that fed the family hand by hand. There's no dishwasher situation over there. There's sometimes no water or electricity. So they're really working hard and they would work all day. And then at night, let's say from 8 p.m. till 7 or 10 in the morning, go into ceremony and give 3,000%. and just singing songs of worship all night long, people drumming, playing different instruments. And this was something that my eyes just couldn't believe the way that they were dancing and just this full expression. Some people would even go into trance and be able to channel messages just from dancing, not even taking Iboga, just from dancing and singing and being with the spirit. It was incredible for me to watch. The woman who initiated me, her name is Mama Toto, and she was doing and helping through a rite of passage, and a machete cut her leg pretty deep. She was limping all day, and she seemed like she was very hurt and very tired. And I saw her, and she for a moment there, she looked pretty weak, you know. I know that you study Chinese medicine, like her shen just looked a little low. And she insisted that we would have a closing ceremony. And in this closing ceremony, you see her get ready, go start ceremony, and danced her ass off. Danced so ferociously and with all this power. And it was just so inspirational because it taught me that there really is this unlimited resource of energy within ourselves, and we're able to access that if we really put our intention to it, and also through the practice of devotion to spirit and to source, we can channel this energy.
That gives me full body chills. I would have loved to have listened to her pulse before and during ceremony just to see how the like just the chi and the shen within it would change. What a badass. Also,
That's exactly how I saw her, just a complete badass.
and so how long were you there for?
I was there for about 2, 3 weeks.
Okay. And so when you arrived, were you nervous? And also I would love to know like I just don't, it's hard for me to understand how you can be like activated and up while with Iboga, because like I felt so drunk and loopy. um and maybe, you know, it like a drunk loopy person, you just stand up and you're like, okay, let's go. Like yeah, I'm just so curious. Yeah, I'm curious about like if you had nerves or if your trust was all there. And then also just yeah, the second half of that question is like, were you up and going or were you resting?
So just a bit of background, I mean, they've been taking Iboga since they were little. Some of them have been with the medicine since their mothers had them in their womb. So the connection to Iboga is very different than it is for folks who try and experience Iboga in the West. And the way that they use it in this ceremonial space, let's say if they're doing initiation, no one's laying down. There's no mattress, there's no blankets. Everyone is sitting. Let's say all the men are to the right, all the women are to the left, and all the shamans, the healers, the gangas are in the center. And you have the musicians in the corner, and it is a celebration. During my time when I arrived, of course, there were these moments of what am I doing? And I know that that's just the mind creating chatter. And I would go back into myself, and there was nothing that was going to deter me from what I felt in my heart was something that was meant to happen. So I did feel the nervousness come up every once in a while, but I always just at the same time felt this incredible sense of peace and trust. So when I did my initiation, you start off in the jungle and you take the medicine in, I was taking it in a plantain. And from the moment that you're ingesting it, the singing begins. And that's something that is important. If you have the intention of, I'm going to do this to journey inward and lay down, then a lot of times that is what happens and it becomes hard to do anything else. But if you're taking it and within your intention, you know that you're going to be up and going and dancing, then that's how it shows up for you. Intention or your prayer before ingesting the medicine is very, very important and can sometimes determine how the experience with the medicine goes. So after I ingested the medicine, the chanting and the singing begins, the dancing begins. And the way that initiations go is that you are expressing to everyone what visions you're having. So you'll go and you'll say bukaye, and once you say bukaye, they'll say yes, and you'll go ahead and share if you saw or had a vision. And you're doing that throughout your initiation. We ended up walking and going into the temple, sitting down, and they sit you in front of a mirror and give you a rattle, and you're shaking the rattle throughout the night and looking at yourself in the mirror. I believe we were able to do some mirror work with you in the ceremony for a brief moment, not all night like they do in Africa. But that's essentially what you're doing. You're seeing with your eyes open. And then, let's say around 3 or 4 in the morning, you get up from your seat and then you dance and you continue to celebrate. It's very, very different than the experience that people have in other settings.
That I do remember at 3 in the morning when you guys changed the music. Well, towards around three, I was really vibing with the music and just couldn't sit still. And then when you started changing the music, I was like, oh my God, I just want to get up and dance and frolic and celebrate. So that makes sense, especially like what a fun time it would be to just celebrate after being in front of the mirror for so long. I didn't get to. When I went to the bathroom, I was able to. Troy was like, "Hey, go look at yourself in the mirror and tell me what you see." And I looked like a cat. And he's like, "What'd you do?" And I go, "I kissed her on the nose." But I know Mana did the mirror work, and man, he saw some demons. Yeah, so I'm excited to one day. I'm excited to one day look in the mirror and see what I see.
You can do that anytime. Anytime, anytime. What I learned in that space was that the way that we describe seeing, we typically think that it's visions, and visions are going to come up and be very, very clear. But what I learned there is that sometimes seeing is hearing. Sometimes you're looking in, and the what Iboga was transmuting to me during the time of my initiation was how to focus and how to tune in and how to be able to do that with the medicine or without. I believe that that's the goal, is not to need anything to be able to access that innate wisdom. And it was showing me that I can look into the mirror and just allow my vision to go blurry and to stay fixed within a spot first visually, and then allow my entire being to just be focused on one thing, on one point. And then through that, the thoughts, the mental chatter wasn't happening.
Interesting. So you didn't really, so I was, because I was giving my next question is what did you see? But it was more that you didn't see. It was like you experienced and sensed, but on a different level.
It was it for because Iboga amplifies your channels and what you're already able to do. For me, I'm able to see, I'm able to hear. I have these different channels open. I'm able to feel. So it was communicating with me through all different channels. However, some people are just really good at receiving information through clear cognizance of just this download, this knowing. So in certain moments, while yes, I could see a vision, there were other moments where I was just receiving a knowing about something. So yeah, I was able to see many things. I was able to speak to my grandmother and to just be able to hold her, to hug her, to cry and express if there was any grief left in my body regarding her passing, and to see so much. And yeah, it was incredible, but certain things weren't visual. Certain things were just this experiential process of knowing something.
Yeah. And I was do you know the practice Tritaka?
Yes, of staring at the flame.
Yeah, yeah, and like staying at that one point, it seems like that was a huge piece of that for you as well. Huh, that's really, really cool. Would you mind sharing just like any last pieces of what really like that where that feel? Because I know a lot of it is sacred and is meant to be, kept in, and you just came back. So like also, there, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but what were some of the, I don't know, the takeaways that right now that now that you're home feel really strong within you from because the initiation it's multiple ceremonies, right? And then you just take some time to recover.
It's one initiation ceremony, and then there's a closing ceremony. And I mean, there's different things that are sprinkled throughout. Um, Before your initiation, you have a day where you're just spiritually bathing yourself with herbs all day in preparation. And then there's a smoke bath before that as well to help prepare. So there's a series of different practices that go along with that. And was your question more about what else
Or I
within?
guess, yeah, I guess it's a, I don't think I meant to say like within that ceremony because it sounds like the whole 3 weeks was a big ceremony. Um, but yeah, now that you're home and you're just reflecting, is there a takeaway or a couple that really feel like want to be said out loud and mentioned here?
Yeah, there was something that happened during my ceremony that I found really, really interesting. So after I was expressing the visions that I had, and I saw my grandmother, I was able to transmute through certain things and have this beautiful dialogue with Iboga. They came to me and they said, "Okay, well, you've seen this. You've seen your grandmother, which is really special within the Bwiti to be able to see an ancestor, specifically your grandmother." And they were just like, "At this point, you can go ahead and play." And I was really taken aback by that, just because, once again, as I was mentioning, there seems like there's this heavy emphasis in the Western approach to serving Iboga, where it can seem a lot about healing, about trauma, and about going back to your past. And here I was in Africa experiencing Iboga in its traditional sense. And it was a celebration. It was a ceremony. It was dancing. It was singing. It was chanting. And what they meant as go play was go and start scanning other people. And I started to get all these insights about others and see their energetic field and things that I can sometimes do with the biofield tuning, but for it to be invited in this space, in that sense, it was very reaffirming to how it is that my partner and I are holding this medicine and holding space with this element of play, of mind transcendence, and reframing certain things so that we can access that, our ability to see, our ability to commune with the subtle field, and to be able to be in magic. So, what I felt like I took away from my experience in Africa was just this big emphasis on movement and this dynamic energy and being able to use the tools to access this divine energy that's within us all, our gifts. Everyone is able to some way, shape, or form tune into this magic. And that's what I really feel called to share, because things can get really heavy, especially with this whole healing culture of people feeling like they are not whole. And that's why my partner and I will say, you are perfect. And perhaps we are in the process of remembering our perfection and remembering our gifts and our ability to do all these things. And it seems that ancient and indigenous traditions seem to have known this from the very beginning, that we can use earth-based spirituality to be able to access this.
Fussy.
Yao yao.
Oh my gosh, it feels like we really came full circle there with you coming home and realizing like it's the magic. It's the magic that's been there all along. And the magic is seeing the divine in everything, and seeing the divine in everything is the magic. It's one thing I've noticed about Iboga, it's like the lessons aren't that complex and different and just out there. They're actually really simple. It's just a more of a depth into the simplicity of it. Ah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Oh,
Thank
I,
you.
I feel so like my toes are dancing. Like I'm just so excited hearing all of this. I'm so excited to hear this again and again as well. Ah, I forgot to mention I do two closing questions. The first is because food therapy within Chinese medicine has just been a huge piece of my life. I always love to ask, and yeah, let people have the opportunity. And what you said about healing, I love that so much. That was really profound within my ceremony, is realizing, oh, I'm healing from healing. I'm healing from trying to fix things. I'm remembering what's been there all along. And for a while now, I've really felt funny about the word healing. And within my ceremony, I realized, oh, that's why, because I was signaling to my nervous system that there's something intrinsically wrong with me when there's nothing. There's nothing wrong. Yeah, it's it's a beautiful game to play in with this life. But yeah, anyways, so what is a food that you have found? So I used to say healing, but now I like to say nourishing. What is a food that you found to be very nourishing within your journey of coming home to yourself?
Right now, given that I'm pregnant, all I can think about is watermelon. So I have not been able to think of any other food. Other than you were asking that question, it's been my number one craving, and I could just cut a big chunk and just eat it, and it's nostalgic and it's sweet and it feels so light, and it has felt very nourishing to me and my body as of late. So I will go with that.
Beautiful. And there's not many yin, because especially within pregnancy, you want to nourish that yin. There's not many yin nourishing foods that are light like that. So that's fun. Okay, then my last question, and you can answer this to whatever depth you're comfortable with, but what is a darkness that you have either found yourself moving through or on the other side of that, or rather, what not the darkness, what is a pearl within the darkness that feels called to be shared here?
This is something that came up in my journey, and it was just how much I worry about things. It was almost like there was this wave that was being signaled of, I got to do this, I got to do that, or seeing the darkness in things, seeing fear in things, feeling like I wasn't going to accomplish something, or it was just, it would manifest in many different ways. And it still does sometimes. And the lesson for me was just to bring it back to gratitude, because I could continue to allow my body to fire these signals of stress and worry. And in that, I can go back to, wow, I love my life. I love how my life is going. I love what I'm doing. And that will all of a sudden calm me down and bring me back to presence and to the appreciation of the present moment. So that is something that I've been weaving into my daily existence. I don't believe in integration, that integration is a period that I'm going to come home and integrate. It's more about integrative living. So one of the biggest things that I've been transmuting these last couple of days has been that, have been noticing this tendency or this habitual pattern of wanting to go into this stressed out state, but returning to gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was a good reminder for me, for so many of us. I know. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you a million and 10 times for sharing all of this. I am full of gratitude for you. And I would love for you to share how people can find you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your voice and your transmission and being able to do this, to create this space for people like myself to come on and share our experience and our truth and our wisdom. And you can find me one through www.rootandwisdom.com. That's the platform where we offer retreats and programs of integrative living. And the nonprofit is sacredrootsfoundation.com. Yes, you can also, once you visit the website, we have plugged in there the Instagram as well. So you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at Root and Wisdom. And you can find me personally on Instagram through joe.trinidad.
Awesome. And yeah, all of that will be in the show notes.
Yeah, I just wanted to leave with a final prayer to anyone listening and to yourself, Stephanie, uh, just to really thank everyone for everything that they're doing and who they are and for their unique transmission in this earth. I'm really, really grateful to be having this human experience. And it is really beautiful when we listen to ourselves, when we listen to the prayer in our heart, and when we allow that to shine and to come forth and to let go of any limiting beliefs and anything that's holding us back from being able to share that authentic expression and that frequency. So, for all those who are listening, thank you for all that you do and all who you are, and for the way that you uniquely move and groove through this earth.
You being my little V, she heard that. She was like, I'm in. I'm here for it.
Moving right into
Yeah, little gift of a cat butt. Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah, that is, everything that I hope this podcast and School of Whispers can be. It's a place where people can share all the beautiful ways that they listen and to be celebrated and seen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the School of Whispers podcast. Make sure you're subscribed for next week, and if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to show your support, be sure to leave me a 5-star rating on your listening platform and to share with a friend. All right, I'll be feeling your energy next week.